For the next 2 hours you are my wife, pure, modest, and mute. He said it exactly without a smile, as if ordering coffee. Galina straightened up in surprise, clutching a wet rag in her hands. The smell of air freshener recently sprayed hit her in the face. There was a trash can behind her. The evening round had barely begun, and there was the voice of the head of security in the earpiece, and, in front of her, a man in a VM suit with a look in which there was no request, only the calculation that the Plaz will be twice as much as a month. You do not need to talk. Just sit next to him. He handed over a black box inside a pale blue dress. Galina did not immediately find an answer. A stupid thought was spinning in her head. I forgot to throw out the bucket before the start of the shift. It's a prank, she asked finally. These are negotiations. I need a role. Your appearance will suit, he said with an almost invisible grin. A security guard appeared in the corridor and stood silently like a shadow. Decide time goes by, he added. Alexander, she stood in the shower room for the staff and looked at her reflection. She gathered her hair in a strict bun with minimal makeup. The women in the mirror were similar but not the same. I am no longer a teacher, I am a cleaning lady. But why do I feel like a teacher again now? My fingers were shaking when she buttoned up her Allen side next to her, leafing through the documents. Don't be afraid, he said without looking. No one will ask you about anything, you just have to be seen. And if someone finds out, she quietly clarified, he grinned, they don't know who you are, and you don't have to be someone, just be close. The car turned off the highway sign, Country KB, a robbery in the parking lot, luxury cars. Lena followed Alexander as if in another life. He imagined her as his wife, a doctor in the past, now taking a break from medicine. She nodded, smiling. No one asked unnecessary questions. Only one of the partners muttered, "You are as original as always." The deputy was a person who was slimy in the company's terms of delivery and legal subtleties. She was silent but listened attentively, clearly as if she was in the audience again, and suddenly a strange confidence appeared inside. I can understand them even if they don't want it. Galina didn't make a single unnecessary movement but felt how her gaze slid over the lines, over the phrases, over the acts. When you have been analyzing other people's mistakes for many years, you learn to hear what no one says out loud. Brake Alexander came up and handed over a glass of water. Everything is going according to plan. You are on top. Thank you, she answered, feeling strange suddenly. He said, you, as if they always knew. Galina did not answer, just looked towards the window where the lights of the evening club were reflected, and in order not to miss new stories, subscribe to the channel and enjoy listening to dinner. The waiters continued to move silently between the tables. The wine flowed in a thin stream, and the light was reflected in the glasses so that the face of each participant seemed a little softer. Conversations flowed quietly, made with politeness under the Satok feeling in the air. Lena sat a little to the side, not attracting attention. Sometimes she lowered her eyes as if examining cutlery, but in reality she listened attentively and thoughtfully. I caught in the speech not only the words but also the fact that between them, Alexander's partner, a small, dry man of about 50, spoke softly but with injections. He every now and then cried as if wondering why she was here, and once leaned towards a neighbor and half threw an interesting choice she can at least read. Alexander pretended that he didn't hear or didn't want to hear. Or maybe he was just waiting for the right moment. Dessert was soon served. The waiter awkwardly touched his partner's hand, spilling a few drops of sauce on the table. The papers lying nearby almost fell to the floor in the hustle and bustle. The secretary began to collect the documents. One of the lawyers took the folder and handed it to Galina. Could you read this out loud just to check the wording? Your voice is appropriate. The phrase sounded almost like a mockery. Someone chuckled. One of those present made a hand gesture like, "No. Let's let him try." She looked at her appraisingly. With a hint of irony, Galina nodded. She picked up the contract. The paper was thick and glossy, the pages crunched under her fingers. She opened the first one and began to read. Her voice was even and calm, almost a school intonation, with clear accents placed precisely. The room gradually fell silent. The desk removed his elbow from the table, and one of the lawyers put down his fork. Galina finished reading the paragraph and suddenly paused. Something flashed across her face, not surprise, but rather concentration. She slowly reread the last line and then once again and calmly, without emotion, said, "Here the wording, if interpreted literally, negates the points about the equality of assets." She turned the page. And here in the section on preferential rights, a mechanism is prescribed allowing one party to challenge the point of the third block. If desired, of course. Pause, and the tax rate is indicated at the old rate. Now it is different. There was a silence, not as dense as before a thunderstorm. The partner frowned. His lawyer leaned sharply towards the documents, took them from his hands, and began to leaf through something. Someone coughed, and the secretary blushed. Alexander did not say a word, only looked, and in this look there was neither mockery nor irritation, only not fake attention. "Sorry," he calmly said. "Galina is returning the papers. I will not PR anymore." It just caught my eye. The partner changed his expression, grinned dryly, and tensed. Sasha cleverly answered, "Alexander," but still did not take his eyes off Galina. After the meeting in the car, there was silence. Alexander got behind the wheel himself. Although usually the driver drives, he did not turn on the music and did not speak first. Only at the traffic light did he briefly say, "Do you understand that you just saved the deal?" Lena looked out the window and in the reflection saw him. Leo tried not to hold her gaze. "I just noticed," she answered. "It's a habit I used to teach. I had a department, then it didn't matter." He did not answer, only briefly nodded at the entrance. He went out and opened the door for her himself. "Thank you," he said quietly, "and sorry for the beginning of the evening." She nodded, smiled, and then walked into the house slowly in the same dress. Still carefully dressed that evening, she did not immediately take off her shoes. She just stood by the window, looked at the city, and suddenly realized no one applauded her, but for the first time in many years, no one laughed when she spoke. A week passed, then another. Galina returned to her usual life: morning bus, cleaning tiles, and the smell of bleach. At first glance, VS was still only inside. Something had already shifted in her head. Every now and then, lines from that same contract surfaced, and not because she wanted to return to that role. It was just that her brain, like an old car, started up again and couldn't stop. She tried not to think about it and drove away thoughts like annoying flies. It would be lucky, but coincidences, as it turned out, are repeated. 2 weeks after the end of the shift, she was handed a note, a simple white card with the company logo and just one line, "If you have time, look in office 306. At the appointed time, she came in. The door was ajar. Alexander was sitting at the table, not at work. Behind the side where they took you, there was a thin folder in front of him. "Don't you want to help?" he asked without looking up. "There are a couple of points that I don't understand too." Veiled. "And you notice nuances." Well, Galina sat down without further ado, leafed through, and again saw an error in the decoding of taxes, a discrepancy in the wording, and a hidden loophole. She explained calmly without pressure. He listened and did not interrupt. At the end, quietly said, "Thank you, you saved me another headache." After that, the meetings became regular, once a week, sometimes less often. He did not offer her to return to the staff, and she did not ask to transfer to the position. Everything was as if by the way. "Look, if it is not difficult, I am just interested in your opinion here." A small thing, but suddenly you will notice she read the rules and helped at first carefully, as if testing the boundaries, and then more and more confidently. Galina knew how the paper system worked. She did not draw conclusions on emotions, did not overreact, and spoke briefly and always to the point. Alexander, he changed imperceptibly, almost imperceptibly. "I did not come earlier, did not pour tea, and asked is the lighting convenient?" He listened attentively. Sometimes if she started to speak a little faster, he even wrote down, "Did you ever teach?" "Yes." Once he asked if there was such a story. She nodded. She was in the law faculty evening department. He nodded in response and did not ask any more. In the team, they started talking first in a whisper, then a little louder. The cleaning lady, who had not been noticed before, now sat in the director's office and edited his papers. Some were twisted. Others were surprised, but there were also those who began to treat Galina with respect. Galina felt it but did not flaunt it. A month later, Alexander himself called her to the main office. There were two from the HR department with an idea. "Do you want to try yourself in a new role on a flexible schedule without meetings but with pay like a second-category lawyer?" She did not answer right away, then looked up and said, If I want to help only you. Without status but with trust, he grinned. I agree. From that day on, VS changed unreasonably, but she still went to the same floor, still greeted the old cleaning lady, and still wore flat, comfortable shoes, but now she walked not with a bucket but with a folder in her hands. Sometimes walking down the corridor, she caught glances, but without mockery. Now in these glances there was respect or at least interest. Alexander did not impose a new meeting but began with a question. Are you comfortable? Am I loading too much? She smiled. I can handle it, and really did handle it. For the first time in many years, she felt that she was living not on the edge of the system but inside, that she was heard, that she was trusted, that she was again not just an employee but a specialist, a woman with experience, with a voice, with her head. She remained in the office alone and finished checking. The night city flickered with lights like a cooling flame. And suddenly it occurred to me that I was again where I wanted to be, only now without fuss, without fear, without haste, and this was the right place. Finally, another half-year had passed. Now, in the schedule of the capital meeting for inventory, she was officially listed on the staff as a lawyer. If something needed to be checked, they called her. If the document raised doubts, they passed it through the secretary. If Alexander was late in the office, they guessed again, consulting with his woman by letters. That's what they called her in the corridors. Galina knew about this but wasn't offended. It was not a mockery but rather an attempt to explain what didn't fit into the standard scheme. She didn't fit the templates, and that was her strength. Now she lived a little differently than before. Her morning began with anxiety about waking up on time to catch the bus to check if she had forgotten a rag and keys to the porridge. Now she got up a little later, cooked oatmeal, and listened to the radio. Sometimes she even did exercises. She did not look for recognition, but it came by itself. Once a new employee asked the security guard, "And who is the woman with the silver folder?" He answered simply, "She is the person to whom even the director trusts documents without verification." Alexander kept his word. He did not impose between them. Yuvat was calm. He knew if she called, she would come, but not on command. But of his own free will, sometimes he invited her to closed meetings as a language consultant. Sometimes he just sent a text. Can this be said more simply? She found because she knew how once a month they had lunch together without unnecessary words or substitutions. He did not talk about that first meeting, and she did not remind him, but once over coffee he said, "I could have lost a lot then," and added after a pause, "Thank you for coming with me even though you could not have done this." Galina nodded and said nothing because sometimes gratitude sounds better in silence. The contract that she then corrected worked. The deal took place. Alexander strengthened his position, but the most important thing is that he changed. Not immediately, not radically, but he began to listen, notice, and slow down, and Galina, she no longer hid herself. She did not try to be someone else. She just was herself with knowledge, with experience, with silence inside, according to the terms of the contract that Alexander nevertheless revised thanks to her correction. He remained a winner. She insisted his partner get a share, but without leverage, without the ability to dictate terms, and Alexander agreed without arguing. It was honest, and this is maturity. One day she was walking down the corridor past the restroom where she once started when a young woman came out to meet her, a new employee of the cleaning service. With a bucket and a mop in her hands, she stopped, hesitated, and recognized Galina. "Sorry, I didn't know you were here." Galina smiled. "I also worked here and did very well." "Don't worry," the woman laughed and then thought and asked, "And who do you work as?" "Now I just help those who hear me," she said and walked away without turning around. At home she turned on the desk lamp and took out an old folder. In it there were clippings from textbooks, printouts, certificates, and tables that she collected back in college. Now they were needed again. Galina knew she would not become famous and would not write a book. But it was not important because now she was herself again, and while playing, she was simply seen, heard, and respected. What do you think? At what moment did Alexander truly see who was in front of him? Write your opinion in the comments, and do not forget to subscribe. There are many more stories ahead.